Good morning. Welcome back to the Deep 404. This is the Middle East update for today. I have just done one on Ukraine. If you're interested in that one, it's should be on the channel now. So in the Middle East, a lot happening. The Houthis continue attack on transport ships, with at least 3 being struck by missiles this week. The US launches its 4th missile strike on Houthi positions in Yemen. Iran and Pakistan, they trade ambassadors and strikes on each other's territory. But I think it's the ambassador exchange is more for show than anything else. I'll get into that in a moment. US and UK ships are now struggling to get insurance, maritime insurance. The US has labelled the Houthis as terrorists, and southern Gaza suffers overnight some of the heaviest reported airstrikes from the Israelis, while the Israelis hide from scrutiny from a UN investigation by banning doctors from speaking to them. All right, I'll get into this now. The Houthis, so they are still fighting, and I would suggest at this stage winning the asymmetric warfare they embarked upon in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden a few weeks ago, getting up to near 30 incidents now of them targeting, hijacking either ships, transport ships, or US military ships. On Tuesday, the Greek-owned carrier Zographia was hit by a missile. A day earlier, Monday this week, the US bulk freighter called the Gibraltar Eagle was struck. And Houthi military spokesman Yahya Saree said on Wednesday the Houthis have targeted a US cargo ship identified as Genco Picardy in the Gulf of Aden, which has been hit with several naval missiles, leaving direct hits. So the Houthis... responding in kind to the US and the UK, who launched a series of missile strikes on their land-based missile positions. The first one the UK was involved in, they used their Tornado fighters in that. Subsequent ones seem to have just been the US. Yesterday, it was interesting when I was forming my notes. Yesterday, reports came out from US defense officials claiming that the Houthis are planning attacks on US bases in Bahrain, Djibouti, and the United Arab Emirates. In my notes, I wrote after that, I imagine that announcement from the US would be an indication that there would be very soon a subsequent strike by the US on the Houthis. Sure enough, a few hours later, the US conducted its 4th strike on Yemen. Now, it's interesting, Admiral John Kirby, the White House spokesperson, and Tony Blinken, when asked about these type of things, are saying, look, we're not looking for escalation in this area, we're trying to de-escalate. It's an interesting way to de-escalate, by bombing someone repeatedly, rather than engaging with that organisation, understanding what their needs are and working from there. Now, I think the US know what the Houthis' needs are. The needs are for Israel to stop bombing civilians in Gaza. The US could, I imagine, open up shipping through the Red Sea by making overtures in that direction and saying, we hear you. Yep, we're going to make moves to do this. How about we just let the shipping continue and while we work on that? Instead, they've gone straight into bombing. Now, that bombing by the US and the UK actually changed the Houthis' position on the blockade of the Red Sea. Initially, the Houthis were only targeting Israeli-aligned freighters. So if you were taking products into Israel or taking it out or owned by Israel or something like that, you were on the radar screen for the Houthis. After the first US and UK missile attack, they expanded that and have now said if you're a UK or a US aligned ship, you are now in our sights as well. Interestingly, reports from Bloomberg are that Russian oil tankers are moving through the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden with no problem whatsoever. And I've subsequently seen further commentary on that on some Russian Telegram channels about that being the case. Shipping costs are increasing because of this activity, which is exactly the sort of thing that the Houthis from Yemen want to do. Increase pressure on the West in multiple areas economically. A shipping container from China to Europe, which now has to bypass the Red Sea, has quadrupled in price, reportedly, due to the Yemeni Houthis' attacks on ships in the area. A Dutch Business Association for Trade and Logistics, Evo Fenedex, suggests the cost of transporting one container has increased from $1,000 to more than $4,000. There is also an increase in prices for additional costs for insurance and such things. And as I said, the US and UK now struggling to get insurance. Bloomberg reporting that some insurers are avoiding insuring US and UK ships that plan to navigate the southern Red Sea. So already the Houthi activities are applying that asymmetric economic pressure with a limited number of strikes, a limited number of resources, vastly inferior resources and capabilities compared to the United States and the UK and Saudi Arabia, yet applying them in such a way that they're having an oversized effect. I think this is a great textbook example of what you'll call asymmetric warfare. The Iranian defense minister has come out and said that the country's armed forces, the Iranian armed forces, know no bounds in safeguarding the national interest and protecting the nation. And this is after the Iranians carried out missile operations against the bases of anti-Iranian terrorists, as they class them, and facilities run by, as they are alleging, the Israeli Mossad spy agency in Iraq's semi-autonomous Kurdistan region and Syria. Now, part of these strikes killed two men who were the head of the Empire Group and Falcon Group, and they were allegedly selling oil to the Israelis, and this is part of the reason why they have come under attack from the Iranians. These remarks were made about the Iranian armed forces by Brigadier General Mohammad Reza Ashtiani in the capital of Tehran on Wednesday. So Iran reaching out, as I showed in video yesterday, firing a long-range missile, a range of 1,200 kilometres. That range, if you map it out, reaches from Iran to Tel Aviv. So I think that was a strong message the Iranians sent yesterday in sending that missile into Syria to the location they sent it to. Not only does it demonstrate that they can reach accurately that distance, but it demonstrates that they have the capability to, with one of these missiles, to reach Tel Aviv in Israel. And what was also interesting, in that attack, allegedly drones were used, and there are no reports of the drones or the missiles being intercepted by air defense anywhere on their trajectory. Now, their trajectory took them over areas of Iraq and took them over areas of Syria, where there are American bases and things like that, and they were not intercepted at any time on that path. So again, I think an interesting, strong message being presented by the Iranians in the area there. And the Iranians being careful not to attack with those missiles US forces or US bases directly, not wanting to escalate, happy to take out those they consider to be terrorists to them, but not the US, but sending a strong message anyhow. Now, Pakistan. So Pakistan and Iran have entered the news yesterday, and this comes after Iran fired missiles into the Balochistan province at some Jaish-ul-Adl, which they consider to be a terrorist group. Now, this province is governed by three nations. Iran, Pakistan, and Afghanistan all sort of collectively govern this area. So the three nations align, but this Balochistan area spreads around them. Now, what is interesting here is that the Iranians dropped missiles into Pakistan territory. Yesterday, the Pakistanis responded by dropping missiles into Iranian territory. There was a big brouhaha and talk of the Iranian ambassador to Pakistan, who was in Tehran at the time, not being allowed back into the country. However, what I think is really going on here is that Pakistan and Iran are actually quite okay with what has happened because the missile strikes have been from one nation into another nation. They do have to say, hey, that's not good. We don't like that. You violated our airspace. Send your ambassadors back, that type of thing. But in reality, Iran is attacking enemies of Pakistan in Pakistan, and Pakistan has been attacking enemies of Iran in Iran. So in some respects, it's a win-win for them both. They can avoid any calls of some sort of, ethnic cleansing or genocide by targeting groups which are in conflict within their own national bounds. So first glance, tension between Iran and Pakistan. In reality, I doubt that is the case. They've, on the global stage, they've said, yes, this is bad, send your ambassadors back, very naughty. In some comments, in some comments that I heard where I think it was between the foreign minister of Hossein Amir Abdollahian of Iran speaking with his counterpart in Pakistan, the Pakistanis had basically said, yeah, look, please don't do that again. If you have any trouble with these guys, we'll deal with it in the future. Anyhow, I don't think that we're going to see a flare-up between Pakistan and Iran. We might hear a little bit about the news about it. These are both Muslim nations. They have pretty good relations generally. The people who they are striking are both enemies of both sides here. Gaza. Residents of the Khan Yunis area in southern Gaza are reporting that they have suffered under the heaviest airstrikes of the conflict. Now, the conflict has been going on for 100 days, since October the 7th. There's some incredible number of 30,000 bombs have been dropped by the Israelis on the residents of the Gaza Strip. Gaza Strip is a small area. There were videos, I showed some yesterday, I'm not going to show them again today, but there's some videos around the hospitals in this area where people, I believe, after rereading more yesterday and this morning, people are now starting to leave that hospital area. They had been congregating around the hospital for safety. Now, as the bombing is approaching, they are leaving the hospital because they believe the hospital itself may come under attack. This would not be unusual. There have been multiple hospitals that have been destroyed by the Israelis in this conflict. The Israelis claiming that they are housing Hamas terrorists in the hospitals and that there are tunnels underneath the hospitals being used by Hamas. Now, I'm sure there are tunnels under those hospitals. The Israelis, we know, built some of them at some stages. So, yes, there are, but there are tunnels reportedly all over Gaza. I don't think there's any need to be bombing the hospitals. The exchange is going ahead. The Qatari leaders there, and the leadership of Hamas resides in Qatar. They brokered a deal between Hamas and Israel to allow medicines to be transported into Gaza. Those medicines were being sent from France to Qatar, from Qatar to Egypt, and from Egypt over the Rafah crossing, I imagine, into Gaza. That has reportedly happened. The reason that was allowed to happen was that some of those medicines are destined for Israeli hostages who require medicine. I think it's about 45 of the remaining hostages. So that is how they were able to get medicines allowed in for the citizens of Gaza, was by ensuring that some of them would go to the hostages. There was some concern by the Hamas leadership that the Israelis may be trying to track the location of the hostages by these medicines. So I'm sure there'll be some inspection and swapping around and testing and things of these medicines before they get to these Israeli hostages, just to ensure that there are no tracking devices in them. Just on the idea of the hostages, the White House has said that Qatar has been overseeing some very serious, extensive discussions about a possible new hostage release deal. So if this is correct, we may see another ceasefire coming while the hostage exchange occurs, which would be great news if that happened and if that could somehow be maintained. Because Yassir Zazouk, who has been sheltering at the Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis with his family, has reportedly told BBC interviewers last night, "This is the loudest sound of armed clashes between Israeli soldiers and Palestinian fighters that I've ever heard." So it does sound as though the airstrikes in the south of Gaza now. Remember, this all started in the north and people were forced down from the north into the south, and the destruction of the north has been quite comprehensive. There is video which came out. I saw it yesterday. I don't know if I have it here. No, I haven't got it here to show. There was video that came out showing the destruction of the Palestinian University in Gaza. Now, this wasn't destruction meted out via an airstrike or a series of shells because there were Hamas fighters in there and the Israelis were trying to capture that area and they were fighting over the building. This building was empty of Hamas fighters. It was mined and then just destroyed, blown up. And this has happened numerous times with schools and things like that in Gaza, where there hasn't been active fighting with Hamas fighters in those buildings. They have been cleared of all people and they have been mined and just blown up by the Israelis in what seems to be a tactic to remove infrastructure from northern Gaza to make it uninhabitable for people, to make it there be nothing for them to return to. But now getting reports that what's happening in the south is at least of equal intensity, and some people reporting it's the heaviest fighting that they have ever heard. Now this is in the south. So this is not good. The Times of Israel is reporting that Israel is forbidding doctors from speaking to a UN group, a United Nations group, which is investigating the October 7 attack. So the UN is there trying to investigate, talk to people to find out what actually happened. Perhaps the reason they're trying to find out what actually happened is because many of the original stories that have come out have changed over time. Pardon me. So this is from the Times of Israel. Officials say that a commission of inquiry formed by the UN Human Rights Council is led by 3 people with anti-Semitic and anti-Israel views. The Health Ministry on Monday instructed members of the healthcare system not to cooperate with the Independent International Commission because it believes that they have anti-Semitic intentions. In recent weeks, senior physicians and hospital staff who treated people from October the 7th, those victims, and treated hostages released, have received letters and emails from the Commission, who operates under the UN Council for Human Rights, requesting them for information and interviews. The findings of the Commission's investigation will be presented to the Human Rights Council in June and to the UN General Assembly in October. Foreign Ministry spokesman Lior Hayat has called the Commission an anti-Israel and anti-Semitic body and has said Israel would not cooperate with it. When asked by the Times of Israel what these claims of it being anti-Semitic were based on, Hayat said, "The Commission of Inquiry is there to investigate Israel without any time limits, unlike any other commission of inquiry from the UN system. Furthermore, the 3 people chosen to head it are famous anti-Semitic and anti-Israel people." The people who are involved, if you want to, you can go and Google them. The Commissioner's chair is Navanathan or Navi Pillay from South Africa, who served as a UN High Commissioner for Human Rights from 2008 to 2014 and is currently a judge of the International Court of Justice. The Commissioner's other leaders are Milun Kothari from India, the first UN Special Rapporteur on Adequate Housing, and Chris Sidoti from Australia, an international human rights consultant and expert in nation human rights institutions and international human rights law and mechanisms. Now, on the face of it, those three people don't sound like they are complete anti-Semitic people, but that's what is being claimed by the Israeli Foreign Ministry, and is their reasoning for banning or forbidding any doctors, nurses, medical personnel who were involved in treating either hostages or people who were injured, wounded, or saw dead Israelis in the October 7th attacks. And I question why. I'll leave you to think of why that might be. Anyhow, let's leave that there for today. It's Friday. I hope you've had a good week. I hope you can have a great weekend, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.